This episode of Slatki Stol is in partnership with and sponsored by Lionheart Pro, catering to all your filming needs.
Would you say that you're contributing to the silent Holocaust?
Welcome to the 5th episode of Slatki Stol.
Grabbing my whiteboard and explaining to them where Bukharians come from on the map.
In this episode, we're discussing a widely unaccepted topic of interfaith marriage.
You want to do Shabbat, but he doesn't care, and he thinks it's stupid, and constantly questioning your culture, or she's constantly questioning. I don't think that that's the person for you just because you love them.
We invited 3 Bukharians who intermarried to talk about it.
Because it just got really bad at home in terms of my decision to date out because I was very serious about him.
I received a lot of stereotypical comments. Oh, you're joining the ones that rule the world. Oh, you're gonna have money now. And these really weird things, yeah.
The only real backlash that I've received was from that one post after we got married from the Bukharian community. Hi.
Keep in mind, if you are highly triggered by the idea of intermarriage, I recommend skipping this episode. But if you're not, pastav chai, grab your semichki, and enjoy.
I've dated those of my own faith. Step forward if you agree. I did once, and it was through my family. They went to a synagogue. You know how they have that list of curated people? So they picked one for me, and it was a Bukharian man. I decided to give it a try because historically I've always not dated Bukharian or Jewish for that matter, only because I also went to Forest Hills High School. And from what I've seen, it wasn't really my cup of tea, so I usually strayed away from it. Anyways, I dated him and only him, and it was only 2 months because it went from being something pleasant to being extremely controlling. When we had our first date, I said, hey, I like to rave, I like to party, I have male friends, this is my lifestyle. And he says, okay, yeah, that works for me, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, that's great. My family was happy, everyone was happy. But then after a couple of months, he started changing on me. He started saying, no, you can't go to your parties. You can't hang out with your friend. Back when I was dating, we didn't have all these social pages, these social gatherings, or the ways to meet other Jewish people. But I also told my family and most people, when I meet someone, I'm not gonna go to them and say, are you Jewish? Because if you're not, then I don't want to talk to you anymore. Hi, my name is Jackie. I'm 30 years old. I'm a Bukharian Jew. I'm a consultant at a tech company, and my lovely husband is Chinese. Just to clarify, we are an interracial couple, not an interfaith. My husband's family doesn't have a faith. Everything is more ancestral and cultural.
I've dated one Bukharian guy and a couple of Jewish guys before I met my husband, and I kind of have this similar story to Jackie. I also went to Forest Hills High School. The Bukharian guy that I dated, I also dated for a few months. So I never really closed the door either. It's just the dating pool for me was quite small in my preferences, and I also moved to New Jersey right after I finished high school. And there's really no Bukharians where I went to school or where my parents moved to, so I've never really vibed with Bukharian men. I'm sure that there are some out there that are wonderful. I'm not gonna look into every corner for one, and I found the perfect guy for me, and he's not Bukharian, and that's perfectly fine. So my name is Nicole. I'm 26. I own an event decor company called Dose of Parties, so I do florals and balloons and everything in between. I'm a Bukharian Jew, and my husband is Austrian, and he's Roman Catholic, but we're both non-observant.
Yeah, so I have tried. It was a lot of first dates. I was in a relationship with an Israeli Bukharian for 4 years, but there was so much going on there. But that's I'm not gonna talk about that because that's personal relationship stuff. I don't want to put the person out there. But there was just so much like that didn't work out. We thought we were gonna go to marriage, that just didn't work out. And then in those dates, it was the same. It was always the same thing. And I think what I was looking for was someone who can think for themselves, right? They don't just think what their parents told them to think. They actually ask, like, why do I believe in what I believe in? And then another thing that also really bothered me was when I would go out on these dates, I felt like they were too much, like putting on too much of a show instead of just, like, and I understand, like, people get nervous, so it's hard to be yourself because it's a first date, but not so much so, like, I wanted someone to be confident enough to at least still be themselves so I could get to know them. And I just didn't see that. I felt like they were trying so hard to look like they could just pass money left and right to the waiter, and it just felt too much of a facade, and I didn't feel grounded with the person in the date. I also tried like dating Ashkenazis before J-Day got like you know where it's a J-swipe, right, where it went to now when it was still wholesome in some sense. Yeah. And so I tried to go out on dates with Ashkenazis, but it was also the other end. I'm kind of like in the middle with being traditional and modern, and I felt like they were way too modern. I couldn't find someone that relates to my background and understands where I'm coming from and sees things similarly to me. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, but the values should be the same if I'm thinking of marriage. Hi, I'm Helen Simcha Perez. I am 28. I used to be a trauma counselor. Right now I'm stay-at-home mom and going back to school for my master's. This is my husband.
My name is William Simcha Perez. So it gets a little complicated here, and we'll definitely converse about it, but I am converting currently to Judaism. I have been in the conversion process for maybe a year and a half so far. I am a Dominican from the Bronx, born and raised. Found myself in Queens. I met Helen through college and really haven't looked back. I come from a different background, I guess. I'm not Bukharian. I have dated those of different faiths. Where I come from, there isn't so much importance about where you come from or the culture or religion. I do come from a traditional family, kind of. So it gets kind of weird and mixed up, but to not find someone that finds the importance in that, I guess was sort of my downfall. To constantly be dating someone and then have them not really value certain traditional culture values, right? That really help promote growth and help promote family and help promote just like an easier life. I found Helen and I was just like, this is so weird because I felt like I related to her so deeply and we were so interconnected, and yet I grew up in a non-Jewish neighborhood with non-Jewish schoolmates.
I received immense backlash for my decision.
Am I really the only one? Oh my God. This is...
I didn't receive immense backlash, but I will sit with you and tell my piece.
Oh my gosh. The word immense, like, mine was immense. Like, that word has, like, so much gravity. It was literally, I couldn't choose another word. My family's gonna kill me, but this is just what it is. Yeah, it was pretty bad. It's been bad since I've been trying to date non-Jewish people, and I understand both perspectives. I mean, our family came from escaping anti-Semitism. They came here, and a lot of what they did was keep it insular because that's protective. That's what we know. That's what we want to do. It's comfortable, and I never saw love as something that needs to be like a specific person. It was more just about a vibe. So the whole like you have to marry Jewish, you have to do this, and never like my family did everything. They did Shabbat, Passover, kosher at home. We were very cultural and traditional, and even with all of that, I didn't feel like that had to triumph my love life. When I met my husband, I only knew him for 4 months, and that's when I decided to leave my home and move in with his parents because it just got really bad at home in terms of like my decision to date out because I was very serious about him. I would say I was disowned for about 2 to 3 years, and it took a lot to work with my family and getting them to accept that this is the choice that I want to make. And it was hard because at the end of the day, and I wouldn't say it was ever like my family or him, you know. I always had hope that my family would come around, and now they're like best friends and we go out all the time together. But it was something new, and it was definitely very hard that I had to go through. Like, we met at 22, I'm 30 now. And it was hard for my siblings to also accept and my extended family to accept, because I am the first and only one in my family to marry out. And that's a big deal for a few reasons. The first is because there is so much lineage that everyone wants to preserve. And secondary, as my siblings are having children, it's seen as a problem, and they don't want to have their kids think that it's okay to marry out, because, you know, what example am I showing? And then with my kids, like, how are we going to raise them? And like all these what ifs. And it wasn't a matter of his character. It wasn't a matter of who he was or how he treated me. It was a matter of the fact that he was different. But it was immense. Like, it was very difficult. It was a lot of stress. I removed myself from my parents' home, and you know, in the Bukharian world, a girl cannot leave the home unless she's married, and everyone heard about it. So, yeah, it was a lot of work. There's no words to describe. Like, I'm talking about it, and there's a lot of feelings behind it, and the body and the brain give you a good job of not letting you remember how difficult and treacherous it was. But one thing I will say is that no matter throughout the entire experience, I never let my husband feel as if he wasn't number one. And I think that's what kind of made it a done deal, was that there were times where I had to say, listen, I know you want to come to my family, but I need you to stay home because I need to go explore it with them. I need to talk to them. So a lot of times we had to have dinner separately, and I had to there's a lot of maneuvering.
I would say that when it comes to my family, like, my parents, you know, as flawed as they are my number one supporters, like, my biggest fans, they're my best friends. Like, honestly, could not ask for better parents. They are, like, truly the best people that I know. And, you know, when my husband and I started dating, they were, of course, like, very skeptical, but I think a healthy amount, because, you know, we met when I was studying abroad. So I'd come home from Austria and they, you know, were like, what the hell? Like, what's going on? So yeah, so I came home with a man. We had quite the significant age gap. He was not Jewish. And so obviously there were a lot of questions. And I think my parents actually went through like all the 5 stages of grief, to be totally honest with you. So at first they were a little bit disappointed that I was not dating within the culture, but ultimately, after some time had passed and things kind of simmered down, a few months into it, we went to Israel to meet the rest of my family, and they were like, you know, it doesn't hurt to like meet him, you know, like what if he's like a serial killer, you don't know, like just, you know, aren't you curious, like, who your daughter is dating, like maybe, you know, have dinner with him or something. And Alex had actually just been in the States like 2 days before because we did long distance, actually, I should mention that. We did long distance for about 3-4 years before we moved in together. So we're going to Israel. He had just visited me in the States for 2 weeks. And so this happened. My parents were like, all right, fine, like, we'll meet him, you know, and then, you know, like, he'll have to come to us, of course. And as soon as I said that to Alex, he booked a flight for immediately when we came back. Like, he was just in the States. So his commitment was like rock solid. Like, he was not going anywhere. And I was so nervous. I was prepping him and telling him how to act, but honestly, I didn't even need to. Like, you know, I was worried that maybe things were gonna get, I don't know, like really volatile, but actually he came and he was the perfect gentleman. Like, he met my parents and my grandma, and, you know, my grandma was like very traditional, very serious, and she was like, you know, like, you have to date within the culture, like, it's very important that we maintain our lineage and all that stuff. And but as soon as she met him, oh my God, he's like her Zolotoy, Slatki, brilliant. Like, that is the love of her life, honestly. Like, she's obsessed with him. He was a perfect gentleman. He was cleaning up the table. He was washing dishes. He was dressed nice. He put the kippah on. He was super respectful. He drank with my dad. He played tennis with my sister. Like, he had some heart-to-hearts with my mom. Like, he was just, like, everything you want your man to be. And we've been together for 6 years. I will say, though, in terms of backlash, like, the only real backlash that I've received was from that one post after we got married from the Bukharian community. Hi.
That's actually how we met.
Yes. Oh my God.
We actually met off that page, so thank you. Maybe that worked out for the best.
Can I actually just say, like, all the people that came into supported me, it was like over 400 comments, I think, by the time that I got removed. Like, wow, I was so shocked and so, like, it was so heartfelt seeing my community just like come to my rescue and tell that page to write off, because, you know, they respected my decision, and it was, wow, like, it was so sweet. Every time I think about it, it just like brings me to tears, because I've, you know, for a long time I felt a little ostracized by my community, and I felt like I maybe would receive backlash, but everyone just came to bat for me. People who I've never met before, people who I didn't know, who didn't know me, were standing up for me, and it brought me closer to my community. It was really, really sweet. So thank you to everyone who commented under that.
Can you explain what happened? Like,
yeah. Oh, I should have done this before. I'm so sorry. Yeah. So Alex and I got married in Italy. We had a really nice, like, Israeli, Bukharian, Austrian wedding where Alex smashed the glass per his request. He did all the Jewish things. He had his kippah on, we did the hora, he wore the jomaz, and one of the guests at my wedding sent like a video of our ceremony to the Bukharian community, and they have a habit of, I don't know, posting like when people marry outside of the culture, and so they did that, and you know, we're like, oh, this is a silent holocaust, we're losing our girls.
Somebody that decided that they were a spokesperson
anonymously
for the
right.
community anonymously.
And it was like their most viral video too. It had like over 20,000 views within like 2 days. It got deleted after some time for like bullying basically and hate speech actually. Yeah, but everyone in the comments was just like, you don't get to talk about their decision. This is lashon hara, which is basically like gossiping, which it's the same thing as murder. Like, it's a sin. We're not supposed to do it. And yeah, everyone under the comments was just really supportive. And then that's how we met, because I was like, this is not right. And also the fact that there was another Bukharian woman who married out. I thought I was literally like the gold mine. Yeah. You know, I was like, oh my gosh, I would love to get to know you. Then we met in person and we hit it off, and it was nice to meet another Bukharian woman who also married out. It's also great to meet you, and it's nice because you feel like it's a minority. Actually, since that post, a lot of people, mostly girls, a couple of guys, have reached out to me because they want advice and help on their relationship, which is also why they're like interfaith or interculture, religion, whatever. And I love talking about it, and I love steering people in the direction that is best for them. I don't want to discourage them or encourage them. I just ask them the right questions, and they kind of come up to their, with their own conclusions. So I'm happy that I get to be that person for someone.
So more from relatives that, those relatives that like, you don't really remember too much from childhood, but they're really close with your parents. Backlash from them, but that barely reaches you. So that's why it wasn't like so much immense backlash I would consider. My dad, when he heard about it, he invited him over, and he was giving him, the works. He was testing him to see if it's serious. He was kind of not believing it 100%, seeing if he like steps up to the plate, really trying to test him out there, and that's how he handled it. In the end, that's like also his golden boy. Like, he's always calling me saying, how's my man over there? He sends him kisses. He's like, give William kisses. He's not funny.
That's
but,
so good.
But my mom was more not okay with it. I think this one's a little tricky because my sister also married outside of the culture and religion, who also happens to be Dominican. It was not on purpose. Again, this just happens. So for her, she was like really going through it. But with me, it was a little different because I think she always knew that I'm gonna have trouble finding somebody. She saw I really went on countless first dates, man. I tried. I even told her the first day I started liking him, I'm like, I'm telling you, Mom, right now, this is happening. I like a guy. If there's someone you want me to marry, shoot them in now. Like, you know, do the matchmaking now. I'll give you a chance. But it just didn't work. And she saw that I just couldn't find someone that fits for me. So she was going through it at first. She said, don't bring him around the neighborhood. I don't want him in my house. She was giving him a hard time, but it wasn't like immense because she really came around at the end. She didn't come to the wedding because I have a complicated relationship with my mom on my own. But she always, in the end, she got to know him and she loved him. Yeah.
Right. I didn't really feel much backlash from the Bukharian community in any shape or form.
What about your own?
From my own, a little bit, not too much. I guess I would say, like, just to add on, her father was amazing. I mean, he did his fatherly duties, you know, tested me and, you know.
Rightly so.
Right? And her mom, I didn't get to talk to her mom, I think, until, I mean, I asked her parents for permission for marriage. I sat down with them, I spoke to them. She was also, like, afterwards, especially after marriage, she was great. She's a really good cook.
Yeah, they played Nagbe together.
Right,
They really hit it off. My grandma who passed away, may she rest in peace, she adored him and he took care of her like in the last few days. He helped her get up the stairs and they just like had a whole nother relationship over there.
Right.
Yeah. But your
parents, right.
Yeah.
So in my background, so I don't know if this counts as backlash too much, but again, I come from a non-Jewish neighborhood. Not a lot of people know what it means to be Jewish. So what happened was I received a lot of like stereotypical comments. Oh, you're joining the ones that rule the world, or...
Yeah, I just want to add, when they said this, it was like an everyday thing that they usually say. They didn't feel nervous about it. They didn't feel awkward. They said it with confidence.
Yeah, it was so weird to sort of like, they're like, oh, like you're gonna have money now, and like these really weird things. Yeah, it was so weird. I had to explain to, like, I'm converted, right? So I keep a kosher household, and to have my family come over, and they're like, where does this go, and how does this like?
They do it
so
great
weird.
though. Like I have to give them props because it's complicated
really
to a new person coming in. So they're on it.
You know what? They're not bad stereotypes.
So to not understand what it meant to be Jewish is one thing, and then it gets so much more complicated when they're like, yeah, she's not just Jewish, she's Baharian, right? And they're just like, I remember grabbing my whiteboard and like explaining to them like where Baharians come from on the map, and then they're just like,
I'm some Haiva.
Yeah, and she's some Haiva and I'm Perez, so we decided to combine it. I feel like there's so much beauty in the Baharian culture that I found, and I thought it was kind of a letdown to let it go too much, and I kind of want my son and his son, and you know, I want all sons, you know, not my choice, but want them to kind of remember their past, you know, at least both sides of it.
I face challenges in my relationship because they're a different faith as me.
The tricky part is faith, right? Because I still want to say yes to this. It was difficult, but it wasn't so much the issue with faith and religion, because he received it very openly. We talked about it before, like I even started dating him 100% when we were friends. I made sure he knew that I want to stay Jewish. This is what I want my house to look like. This is how I want to raise my kid. Like I spoke about each detail. So it wasn't so much with faith, but what we do seem to butt heads with is our upbringing and lifestyles from home to this new home. And I feel like that still counts, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you want to add?
No. Yeah, so it's like in the Bukharian community or the Bukharian culture, they're very on top of you, like very, very like disciplined. And in my community, you could be 45 and they're like, yeah, you're good, you know, like don't worry about anything. In terms of marriage,
marriage, yeah. Like your dad told me, you know, don't worry about kids when you get married. You know, these days people have kids 30s, 40s, it'll be good. And he said that from like a place of love, so I have time to build my career. But I like turned to him and I was like, I can't believe your dad told me this. Like no one in my life ever told me that. You know, everything needs to be done yesterday. You know, so there's stuff like that, and that comes to that house in small ways. In some sense, I feel like other people experience that differences even in the Bukharian culture when they marry each other, because this is like stuff like where do you put the bread in the kitchen? Do you put it in the pantry or in the fridge? So there was kind of stuff like that. It's but this does encompass the culture, right? These things, because
your father was a big inspiration for me, and sort of like my dad was such a laid back father, and then meeting her father and seeing him and his values, and I'm like, oh, I'm kind of like going about my life a little bit different, and so I decided to change that. And you know, she met me in college, and I was trying to get 3 PhDs in physics, philosophy, and psychology for whatever reason, and then I was just like, wait a second, you know, it's just like, let me just focus more on something a little bit more.
Like, yeah, I asked him, I was
tangible.
like, and you know, while we were talking, I was like, you want to get married and have kids though? Like, that's, you said that's in your
Right.
plan, and you're like, yeah, I will someday, and I guess that's like your parents' lifestyle in you, right? And I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, when do you plan to do that amidst your 3 PhDs? It's fine if you want to mix it up, but just so I know. And then he was like, wait a minute, this might not be the best plan for me.
So I took the question a little differently, and you addressed it in a way that I would want to address it. So obviously I'm Jewish, my husband is not, but his family doesn't have a religion. He has faith, we both believe in God, and he does the Jewish holidays with me as like a cultural practice. But where we did have a challenge was accepting how I wanted our household in terms of the culture. So we do it in an interesting way. We keep kosher at home, but not in the way that you would think. So we have the dairy set, we have the meat set, but then we have a third set of dishes for not kosher. So we do that because my in-laws, they make non-kosher food, and for them to switch over everything, it doesn't make sense. And their love language is through food. So we would accept that, and it's also a big part of his culture that I would not want to get rid of, and that I personally love. Like, I love seafood, I love non-kosher food, and that's how we keep our household. But one thing that was hard for my husband to do was like understand that we needed 3 different sponges, 3 different sets, 3 different whatever, and you know, if like one sponge touched like the non-kosher, like the other fork, I'm like, no, now you gotta like either throw it out or you gotta bathe it in hot scalding water. And he's like, Jackie, don't you just have OCD? And I'm like, maybe, but this is like what we have to do. And he said, why? And for me, it's not more of a religious thing. It's obvious. It is for more tradition, but also I don't want to have a steak on the same plate I had my pancakes. That's just the way, you know, I do it. And then the holidays weren't that difficult. It was mainly the food and you know, the different dishes that were a struggle. And also when I met my husband, I hated being Jewish. I hated this identity. I hated being Jewish. I hated being Bukharian. There's so much pressure. There was so much to know. So when I met him, I wasn't there. But then when I did meet him, it started growing more. So for him, it was like, okay, well, I met you like this. And then, you know, we became like this. But I think we both were at a very low point in our respective cultures, and belief in God and faith, where we rose together with it. And it was a lot of learning curves and teaching curves. And what you said about how disciplined we are, it's so true, because I would tell my husband, I was like, oh, your New Year is coming up, what do you know about it? Because for us, Rosh Hashanah, we do whatever. He's like, oh, I don't know. And I said, why don't you know? Because in my family we have to know. And his family took a more laid back approach, but then by me speaking to him about you should know it, put him on that adventure, and now we're both very strong in our respective cultures.
I'd have to agree with that. I feel like a lot of things in my life are very intrinsic because you're just born with them, right? You don't really know why you do the things that you do if your family does them. And so actually dating my husband, it has given me an explanation, right? Like you said, like when we celebrate Rosh Hashanah and Purim and Hanukkah and all of our really great holidays, we just celebrated them because we needed to, because we had to. It was just tradition. And being with my partner, I really had to explore why, because it was my responsibility to teach him these things so that he understands them and has the same appreciation as I do, and he does, and it just works so great. So I don't think that we necessarily faced challenges in our relationship because of our different religions, because I didn't really grow up really religious at all. Like my parents are very traditional in the sense that they like to keep kosher. We follow all the high holidays, but I didn't really have to sacrifice anything in my life. I never really went to temple, never kept Shabbat, never really kept strict kosher, so I didn't really have to change anything about my life. And he's about the same. He didn't go to church, like he's non-observant, so he didn't have to change anything about his life. So we're just like normal, regular, I guess. So there wasn't really a challenge with that.
It's important for me to raise my children Jewish.
I think we're all here because of yes. And I think as women, we have this, I don't want to say power, but because we're women, our kids are Jewish because we are women. But I'm not saying I want my kids to, be raised Jewish because of that. I've developed a huge love and admiration for it with my husband, and it's also a part of their identity. And one thing that I struggled with growing up was this fine line between tradition versus religion. For us, we are wanting to raise them both culturally and religiously. So what that means is culturally, like the holidays and the things that we do, but also the religious aspect of it. Why? Where does this come from? What's the spiritual meaning behind this? Because when you do look at it and read it, there's a lot of morals, there's a lot of good lessons that you can learn from our teachings. And that's the approach that we want to take. And it's because it's their identity too. And respectfully, we would do it also for the Chinese side, but they don't have anything on the religious side. So the way I break it down is our children are a cultural embodiment of Bukharian and Chinese, but religiously they'll be Jewish, but they're also Jewish because they're Jews. So, yeah.
I would say it's important for my kids to be like me, and I'm Jewish, and so and I love that my husband and I were able to kind of mesh our lives together really nicely, and so I'm super excited to teach my kids about the history of our people and our traditions and our culture, not necessarily with the religion. And I'm also excited to do that on his end and teach them about Christmas and about cool like Austrian things and stuff that's important to the both of us. So even though I won't be bringing them up religiously, because I also didn't grow up religious, so it's a little foreign to me, I'll definitely keep the traditions and some of our cultural stuff, and they're definitely going to know Hebrew because I was born in Israel, so that's very important to me. And
Yeah, we decided to also raise our child Jewish. For us, Judaism is mixed with philosophy because we've met in the philosophy club, like that's like our thing. But it's also because we know that for us, these kind of values are very important. Values, whether it's from Judaism or whatever it is for each person, it leaks into your everyday life. It's the choices that you end up making, the places you end up being, and we don't even notice it. And we want to, knowing like how this all adds up to create the human being, we understood that for us, the child we would prefer for him to have this background,
Right, yeah.
Ideology and whatnot.
Yeah. I come from a place where there weren't any traditions, there wasn't any religion. My parents were a mix of Catholicism and Christianity, but they weren't serious about it at all. I grew up in that, and to me it was very difficult. It was very difficult to identify with anything. It was very difficult to feel at home in so many different ways. And I feel like I don't want my child to go through that. Yeah. I want my child to have that structure, to be able to fall back on something, especially when life gets hard and you go through so much and you start questioning yourself and not knowing where to go and
where your roots are. He made me also realize that is important, because a person, they might not even realize it, but there's like a hole missing in them if they don't have some kind of foundation.
Right.
And this is already speaking outside of Judaism, whatever it might be for somebody, it's nice to know where to go back to. I don't know why a person needs that, but that's a whole nother conversation.
It's so true. My parents were to tell me, Jackie, if you're dating out, your kids are going to be confused. And I said, I was raised by two Jewish people and I was confused. I struggled with my identity. I struggled with who I was. Like, I was Bukharian, but I was also Jewish, and I was American. And, I know Russian, but then I don't know Hebrew, and it's like we're doing this but not that. And I was learning my own identity growing up and seeking external sources. And until I met my husband, who knew the Old Testament, and I was able to ask him comfortably all these questions without it feeling, brainwashy, it made me more at ease, and that strong foundation that's needed.
Additionally, if your kids are growing up in America, which I'm sure for most of the people who are watching probably yes, your kids are going to be exposed to Christmas and Kwanzaa and Eid and all of the things that make America what it is. It's just a giant suitcase of like all these cultures. So even before I met my husband, my friends and I still had Secret Santa, when I was little, and we still had like our, like New Year's tree at home, which is the same as a Christmas tree, basically. So I'm really excited to like have our kids light the menorah and also do a Hanukkah bush or a Christmas tree. And I'm just excited to like mesh our cultures and religions together, even though we're not really religious, but you guys know what I mean.
Can I quickly plug in an organization for those in similar relationships? It's called Honeymoon Israel, if you haven't done it. It's an organization where it takes interfaith or interracial couples of one Jewish, one non-Jewish partner to a birthright trip. Long story short. And we went on it in January of last year. We met some amazing couples, and essentially it's to meet like-minded people or couples like this, and then your families grow and they have like camping and stuff like that. But it's like birthright, where they also ask, like, you go all see the sightseeing, but they also ask you questions in terms of what does Judaism mean in your household, like how are you wanting to raise, and just asking such good questions to grow yourself as a couple. So if anyone wants to look into that, it's called Honeymoon Israel. Just type it into Google.
I don't always recommend marrying outside of your religion.
Oh, all of us. Surprised.
Yeah. No, it's hard work. I mean, it's not all roses. I mean, listen, if you're marrying someone Jewish, that could also be difficult based on their different observance level too, right? And I think it depends on the type of person you are, and it's not for everybody. For me, it was for me because I love the taste of the outside world, differences. I was curious, and I was also developing a strong sense of who I was, where I felt like I could share that with somebody and it not shaking up what's there. But for other people, they have a sense of comfort in their own people, like dating someone Bukharian, dating someone Jewish, and that's totally fine. But you got to see if it's your cup of tea. It's definitely not for everybody. Not everyone can do what I can do, and I can't do what, like a Bukharian woman marrying a Bukharian man. It's very different. You got to accept the challenges, where if you're dating someone or marrying someone that is the same as you, there are unspoken rules, meaning you don't have to talk about the cultures, the food, the Shabbat. You don't have to talk about it. It's what it is. You already know it. And then you kind of fast track things and whatever. Not saying there's not other challenges. But then there's people like me who love to explain and love to go over it. But then there's some people that I know that don't want to be bothered with it. They just want you to know it, and then they call it a day. So it really depends who you are and what you seek in a relationship and what you want out of it. And not even yourself, like other factors. Like before I spoke about how I had immense backlash, I was ready for that because I knew within me that that's who I was, this is where I needed to go. But other people aren't like that, and that's totally fine. So you gotta just know who you are, I think, is the moral of the story.
I'm a very pragmatic person. I'm very realistic. I'm not someone who's gonna sit here and tell you that love conquers all, because it doesn't. Just because you have feelings for someone doesn't mean that your relationship is going to work out. And I get a lot of questions, especially from girls, of like, oh, I love this man, and I want to be with him. And I'm like, yeah, but what else is there? Are you compatible? Do you share the same values? Do your families like each other? You have to enjoy at least the same things or support each other's passions. You have to be able to say that you're gonna wipe this person's ass at 75 if need be. And if not, then like that's probably not the person for you. If your families despise each other, and it's a problem every day because you want to do Shabbat, but he doesn't care, and he thinks it's stupid, and, you know, he's constantly questioning your culture, or she's constantly questioning, like, you know, all of your traditions, or makes fun of them. Like, I don't think that that's the person for you just because you love them, or just because you're attracted to them, or you think that you mesh well, or there's some chemistry there. I think there's so much more that makes a relationship successful, and you have to ask these really difficult questions. And, you know, a lot of times the answer is probably not. Like, this person is not for me. So you have to make sure that you kind of, you know, you complement each other's lives, that your families are able to live like cohesively, you know. So
love is definitely not enough, and what I would tell my kids is I don't expect you to marry Jewish. I would be a complete hypocrite, right? But I would want you to find someone who respects your culture and your religion and your tradition as much as your father does.
I agree with both of you. I feel like you really have to know yourself when you make these decisions. I feel like you have to know yourself regardless when you start dating. Which is very hard to do because we are pushed to get married at 18. So not much we know at that age, but you have to go through it. You have to ask yourself a lot of questions. You have to ask yourself, if you want to do Shabbat, how do you want to do Shabbat? How observant? What do you really value? What are you passionate about in life? So everything that you guys already said.
Marriage is complicated on its own.
Yeah.
It's so hard, and on top of that, to add more complications, it would just make it even more difficult. Yeah, I do feel though that it's weird. Like I would say really pay attention to your like group of friends and like who they are, just because like coming into Judaism, like not everyone understands what it means to be kosher. Not everyone understands what it is. So maybe you'll be okay with things, right? And you'll enter the relationship perfectly fine, but then your family or your group of friends won't, you know, they just won't. And then to bring them over, and then it can get a little bit dicey because they're not respecting your house rules, right? And that can really turn things on its head.
If your partner wanted to raise your kids half and half their religion and half your religion, would that be okay?
Oh, that wouldn't work for me. That, like, for me personally, like I couldn't date or marry someone that had another religion, which is why I think my husband worked out the way that he did, because it's more cultural based. And when we did look at, you know, the Chinese and Jewish cultures together, like where you find Jewish people, you find Chinese people, and vice versa. Like we're very integrated. But personally, like I couldn't do it because because I'm a woman, the kids are Jewish, and then I wouldn't want them to like do something else that, you know, that would be contradictory to her. Not saying that they can't celebrate with friends or whatever, but within our household. But other people do it, and that's totally fine. Like I have friends who have it both ways, but personally for me, it wouldn't work out. But to answer your other question about, you know, if they're the same, is it like better or not? I think you were saying that. But also people within the same culture and religion can also have disagreements. Like as I said before, someone can be more observant. Like what if like they're both Bukharian Jewish, one is secular, or they're both secular, but then one of them decides to want to be more religious, but then the other one doesn't want to be religious. And then you have that same component of what I believe an interfaith or an intercultural relationship would have.
This is going to sound weird coming from someone that is not Jewish, but I wouldn't date someone or marry someone that, you know, has a different faith. If that makes sense.
I do. I
right.
have a different faith.
But I mean, like I feel like it's so important to, for me to just have that level of consistency, and just that level of ease to come in. How often do you want to do Shabbat? You know, keeping kosher. You know, someone that'll allow you to, you know, have the freedom to, you know, study, and to sort of like go to shul. Like there's a lot of different components in it, and it's so. I
don't know, like people do what they do, but I'm gonna be honest, I don't know if that really works, because again, it has to do with that grounding. And although, you know, it's nice to have like both parents if that's how they do to bring their sides, and culturally it'll work, but I don't know if it'll work by religion and faith.
Yeah, religion and culture is different. Like for us, it'll be culturally Chinese, Bukharian. Like, for example, for Shabbat, you know how everyone washes hands? Culturally Bukharian, only the men do it. Religiously, men and women should be washing their hands. So culturally, like you can do whatever. Like for example, in my marriage, we have Sukkot, but then Chinese people have the Mid-Autumn Moon Festival where they also eat outside on the day of the moon. So that's culturally, but like religious wise, there's no religion attached to why they do that. So it would be like the religion aspect wouldn't mesh. Like I couldn't do like, Judaism, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Judaism, Mormonism, whatever. Like our household is Jewish with Chinese and Bukharian culture.
Would you convert for your partner?
No.
Will, you mentioned that you were interested in Judaism before you met Helen. Can you tell a little bit more of your story?
Right. I was in Queens College. I think it was my freshman year. And I would always want to heat up my food somewhere. And on campus, there were only 2 microwaves. There was one in Queens Hall, which was like really far away from the main campus, so to speak. And then there was this Jewish club that had a microwave, and I was told to go. So
The Hello Club.
The Hello Club, right. And I went there often to heat up my food. And then I found out they had a free piano that anyone can come in. So I would also go there and play the piano. Not that I can play the piano, but I just like being on the piano. Being there and talking to a lot of different people, I started to realize that, in some really weird way, something resonates with me. And I started to find myself having a lot in common with them. And then I just started learning and started speaking to different rabbis that were there. The first rabbi that I met, her name was Rabbi Zechariah. I just kept learning more and more and more about it. I was then taken to a trip that the Hillel Club does. I don't know how often they do it, but I was taken to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. And then after that, I think it's the MLK Memorial. And it just, I don't know, like it also something that just impacted me during that trip as well. And I kept going down this path of this rabbit hole of just like learning more and more about Judaism. And the more that I learned about it, the more I felt like myself. And that was really surprising for me. And then I just kept meeting different people. And then I met Helen, and then I was like, I'm like really interested in this already.
It's like every holiday since we've gotten together, he's done with me. So like since the first Yom Kippur, he kept the fast just because he was like really interested in it. And he started realizing like how the fast made him feel, like just all these concepts. And he felt like it really fit for you, right?
Yeah.
This is completely
He was curious about it previously.
This happened by accident.
Yeah, my journey with Judaism started way before I met Helen.
Would you convert for your partner?
No, I'm sorry, but I wouldn't. I wouldn't be true to myself. It wouldn't make sense.
I wouldn't either because I would never expect him to convert. So it would be hypocritical of me to do that or to ask for that.
I don't know. I think I'm null because he doesn't have one, so I can't convert to Chinese.
My interfaith relationship has benefited me in ways that I didn't think it would.
I already lived like a really full, wonderful life before I met my husband, but I think I really blossomed within our relationship and marriage. There's so many things that we got to do together that I don't think I would otherwise do if I married another Jew or if I married another Bukharian, because we travel a lot. We did long distance for so many years. So in the middle, we always met in different countries before we got married. And it's amazing. Like we spent our 1-year anniversary in Paris. We honeymooned in Africa. We climbed Machu Picchu. Like we went to Mauritius and Seychelles and like dozens of countries together. I don't think I'd be able to do that if I married another Jew, because you typically wait to do all this stuff until you get married. And I also lived by myself before. We have lived together before, which I think is really important to kind of find yourself as a person and really know who you are by yourself without having someone near you. I think it's really vital. I see a lot of people in our community go from being a child to a wife or a husband, like going from either a parent, son, or daughter to being straight into like a spouse. And I think that's a really hard change. Additionally, like I've been learning German for the past 6 years. Alex has been learning Russian. Everyone in my family speaks English, but you know, my grandma only speaks Russian and he wanted to talk with her. So he's been learning for the past 6 years. He's better than I am. He reads and writes and I don't even know how to do that. So, you know, like I know an additional language. I travel a lot. We've been able to live on our own, and I don't think I'd be able to do that if I married in the faith or in the culture.
Yeah, I would say yes, I've benefited in a lot of ways. I know my religion better. I know the Old Testament better. I was challenged by my husband in a lot of ways, meaning I had set ways of thinking because I grew up in the Bukharian community, and he would, you know, challenge me in that. The funniest joke I actually said to my family, because my grandpa has a tendency of asking for things without saying please. And I would say, "Oh, Grandpa, I heard you say please." And he said, "Please." And I said, "You know who taught me this word?" He's like, "Who?" I said, "My husband, because for whatever reason, our family, this word is not used." Aww. You know, so, and my husband also taught me that just because you say please doesn't mean you get what you want, which was the hardest part. But Judaism, more like life, and also on the traveling, because I feel like the countries that I visited, maybe more like most Baharians wouldn't visit, because it's not like your typical country. It's not Caribbean.
Bro,
it's
when
not
I tell
whatever.
people that I honeymoon in Africa, they're like, "Oh my God, like what do you mean?" And
so yes, 100%, and I would do it all over again.
Yeah. Same for me. I think for me though, it's more like intrinsic benefits, because I can talk to someone and I know the insides of what like Bukharian men say, how to deal with their wives. I've heard it only because I just happen to be in those circles, overhearing, and I don't feel like he just tells me yes to calm me down. I can talk to him like, and I actually feel like he cares to listen to me. He's not waiting to shut me up. I feel like he actually works on things with me. He listens to my emotions. Like there's stuff that I never thought that I would even have in a marriage. Because my mom also, because they prep you for marriage, they teach you how to behave in front of your husband, your dad too. And I feel like he's like telling me that I just need to chill, you know, like just keep loving him, and it doesn't have to be extravagant, just show that you care, and he brings it right back.
Like a relationship shouldn't be transactional. And it's, you know, get to know the person. You're with them for life, you know, if you marry them, and it's just something that, hear them out, you know, explore their world, you know, grow with them. And for me, I have grown so much. And I also learning Russian, and говорю по-русски чуть-чуть, right?
He loves saying that.
Oh my God, when he like answers the phone to my grandma, we just all melt. Like it's so cute because he has the perfect Russian accent. He looks Russian, you know. So it's just like everything just adds up really nicely.
So much culture, so much understanding of a world that I didn't, you know, experience before.
I think, while at the same time how we mentioned like the high discipline and the high expectations that they put on us, I think that's something that we realize is, although that's very important to have someone on the right track, I think it should be balanced, because at the end of the day, these high expectations and demands end up not just hindering, it ends up making someone act in a way that's unfavorable at the end. So it's not really a good plan by our community. I think that if we look into that more and kind of tweak it, it would be so much better, and we would have people that know themselves better, get married, and it doesn't lead to divorce. We might even have less suicide. I mean, I don't know.
Being in a relationship where you're both Jewish or both Bukharian, that's not like the secret sauce here. You're not going to immediately have a successful relationship just because you come from the same culture or just because you have the same religion. Like you have to really match well with each other. And I mentioned that earlier. Like there's so many things you have to tick the boxes, you know?
Would you say that you're contributing to the silent Holocaust?
No.
Our kids are all going to grow up with Jewish values, and they're all going to uphold the traditions, and I don't think it has anything to do with who we married. That's our decision as Jews to pass on those traditions from generation to generation. So,
and also because again, we're speaking as women where we have this biblical right where our kids are Jewish. I think this also goes for the men should, this is why we have different denominations, Reform, Reconstructionalists. I think the men should also be counted and not be so secluded, because if the community continues to ostracize the couples or even the children, you're doing the opposite. If you want them to be a part of Judaism or be part of the community, then you welcome them and show them the love, embrace them so that they would want to be a part of it. Not, oh my God, you did this, you shouldn't be doing this. That's going to make them stray away from it more. That's doing the opposite. I think this is why maybe more religions and cultures have grown more, because we are so insular and very specific, and that's where the Reform movement came, where it started accepting the father side of the kid being Jewish. But there's more to being Jewish than, what we spoke about here. It's an embodiment of a lot of things. So no, I think we are expanding ourselves. And, you mentioned it's probably weird for me to say this because I'm not Jewish, but you married one of us, you're part of it, you are Jewish. My husband is practically Jewish, just as I'm
honestly.
Chinese in the sense of how I embody myself in his culture. I feel like when you marry into, or you're a part of these larger cultural, deep-rooted, seated families, you're a part of us. And I think we need to start spreading our table more, especially when our Old Testament was a story of non-Jews. They were known as Hebrews and stuff. My husband would be better at speaking about this than I am. But if we look back to our text, it's all of these non-Jews that we followed. It was until much later that we became Jewish. And even our holidays that continue growing your table, don't, treat your neighbor, love thy neighbor as you love yourself. And I feel like as Bukharians, we're so focused on Shabbat, kosher, the holidays, that we're forgetting about the other 100 rules, which is be nice, don't jip, don't gossip, don't be an ass, don't all this stuff. Yeah. So even though we here are not doing what the Bukharian people do on that half, we're satisfying the other half of the mitzvahs.
Just to play devil's advocate, I think that it can stop, right, in some sense, where if someone gets married and, they don't want any of this, right, they're an atheist or they're agnostic, they don't believe in Judaism, so they marry outside of their religion, and there it can stop. But that's because this person already has decided that it stops with them. It's not going to happen with someone who makes sure that their partner respects their beliefs.
Yeah. Also, who's to say that those kids won't pick it up later? And be like, yeah, my parents weren't really religious, but I became religious. I see that happening more and more.
Yeah.
So
it's up to the person,
yeah,
right?
It's on the individual.
Stop it, or continue it.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.